we're live.
Hey everyone.
Yay.
Oh, hi. Today is, I hope everybody had a good Christmas break. We weren't able to stream on Christmas because, as you're well aware, we all have our own obligations with friends and family, as we well should. But we're here now, and holy crap, just the kind of stuff that fell into our laps today will absolutely freaking blow your minds. And no, that's not clickbait. That's actually like what's going on.
Well, the thing is, a lot of the stuff we're going to be presenting today is actually old news. It just got brought to our attention recently, but it received little to no attention back when it was relevant. But yeah, this is the time of year also when you got to really be closely watching the world governments, and we're also going to be getting into that because yeah, a bit of what we have today is stuff that our lovely state did over the holidays when you all were enjoying your families and we were enjoying ours, and they thought we weren't paying attention.
Oh yeah, you were too distracted. Don't be too distracted by the 24 hours of a Christmas story on TV.
Obviously, like this is the point where what this is watch the other hand time.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm dead serious. Like when I went over to my relative's house for Christmas Eve, I was like on their computer watching Free Thought Project every couple of hours. Like every hour I'd go check it. I'd go check for updates. No,
Yeah,
I wasn't letting anything get past me. I made a whole comprehensive list of the things that I found that they did on Christmas Eve. So, and you can see that on Gab still, if on my Gab profile.
Yeah, I actually had that list up as a list of things we're going to talk about, but then a whole bunch of things dropped today, which I think are a lot more important. Well,
Yeah,
relatively speaking.
so that's the reason why we're pointing out the list that I created is because some of the stuff on that list we're not going to be talking about today, but it is important. So you should go to my Gab profile and you can see all the stuff laid out there.
All right. So, how about you introduce the first bombshell that's dropped today?
Which one specific?
Let's
There's
let's go with the suicide note.
Okay, well, this is actually old news, but an ICE agent committed suicide on May 6th, 2016, and this was covered all over the media on May 9th. He just walked out on a pier and heroed himself. Now, I mean, government agent killing himself, I mean, sounds good, but then you know, he left behind a suicide note, and the suicide note detailed some very grisly things about what the government was planning on doing and uh, how it curtails to our pertains to our current situation.
So basically, what was going on is that this guy was not just like some depressed worker or some crazy guy. He was seeing what was going on in his line of employment, what he was being trained to do, what he was going to be asked to do, and he realized that he actually had a soul, a conscience, and was generally not a horrible person, and decided that since he had to tell somebody, he might as well do so in such a way that the government couldn't silence him. So he killed himself and left behind a suicide note that the media will be forced to publish. And in that note, it talks about how basically the government is prepared. They're preparing. This was 2016, by the way, so you can imagine that they're still doing this, and they have been doing so for years. Basically, they know full well that the economy is built on a house of cards, that banks are insolvent, that people have too much debt, that the currency is unstable, and they know that at some point it's going to come down, and they understand that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to try to take advantage of the situation.
Well, I have the note pulled up right here. It's really long, but I can read it word for word if you'd like.
Actually, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, sure.
The America I grew up in and cherished has been murdered by its own federal government. Our Constitution has become meaningless and our laws politicized so badly they're no longer enforced except for political purposes. Our elected officials to a person utterly Our elected officials are, to a person, utterly corrupt and completely devoid of any love or respect for the country which pays them. To them, everything is about keeping power and making illicit money from backroom deals. I was hired to enforce the law, to capture and deport people who came to this country against our laws, but now, if I dare to do that, I face being suspended or fired because our president refuses to faithfully execute the duties of his office.
Pause for a
Instead,
second. Pause for a second. Just to clarify, that would be under Obama.
yeah, this was May of 2016. I
Yeah, that's what I
noted
thought.
that already. Anyway, instead, I come to work each day and collect a paycheck twice a month for intentionally doing little to nothing. I cannot wait. I cannot and will not be party to this fraud, to this usurpation of the law, or to this despicable or to the despicable politicians betraying our nation. If the American people knew what this government was planning, they would rise up and overthrow it. If I or anyone else in the federal government revealed what is coming, we would be killed anyway, so I will now reveal what I know. We in federal law enforcement have been drilling for several years to control riots and uprising from a coming financial collapse and widespread bank failures. The drills involve life-size images of American men, women, and children whom we are told to shoot for practice and to get used to it. I'm just pausing here because this is, starting to mirror a lot of what we're seeing today. Not necessarily just with the financial collapse, but I read that at first and I immediately, after Trump was elected, you see Antifa and the alt-right, and you see how the media seems to just be egging both of them on, and how both of them are platformed for months after even one event which no one even remembers. Well, this is exactly why. They're trying to condition us for this. When the financial collapse comes, people are rioting in the streets, and the police just start gunning down people and throwing them in prison for not actually breaking any laws. Now,
I
I'm
mean,
not saying that Antifa assaulting people, they aren't breaking laws, but when they're just being taken down and arrested, them and the alt-right, the message it's sending is simply that, the police need to be cracking down on rioters. They're not showing the trial. You never even hear or know about who these people are. And I think the disguises that they wear, that's partially, intentional as a propaganda device for this exact purpose. The people in those riots are completely depersonalized, and you can disassociate from them at that point, and you can just see them as the righteous cop taking down the rioter. It doesn't matter what their intentions were, what they did. That's just what you're told to cheer on.
to say nothing of the fact that you have all of these Antifa riots, all of these alt-right events, the police are consistently and constantly told to stand down, to just allow this stuff to happen, to allow it to just get worse. If the police actually did their job and kept things under control, I think things wouldn't be nearly as uh, damaging as they usually are. You see
You
people kicking down trash cans. You see even you see what's it called, cars being torched,
it
and
was
that's only possible.
Charlottesville.
Yeah, and that's only possible
I'm,
because
But yeah,
Antifa doesn't have any is allowed,
that's
and
well,
that's gonna.
that's what's so interesting. That's what's so interesting about this is it's not just that it provides a whole new context which previously didn't exist to media deception and exactly what they're doing. I mean, definitely the reason why they're specifically focusing on Antifa is because anarchism is becoming more popular, and these people aren't anarchists. They're a bunch of violent collectivists. They're a bunch of edgy progressives. So,
Bunch of twats.
yeah, they're not. That's definitely part of it. So that this is what people think anarchists are, but it's definitely planned programming.
Oh yeah, without a question. You have the image in people's minds of Antifa rioting, kicking down trash cans, and then they'll hear riots on TV and just think like, oh yeah, the police will take care of it.
Yeah, I meant predictive programming, but I mean I'm kind of tired right now. But
All right. Well, here's another thing
fine.
that I think is interesting is that you remember the cockroach stories that we used to do? We stopped doing those because they're kind of repetitive, and this really brings a new context into why we have cops who are so ready and so willing to gun people down. Because could it be that's what they're being trained to do?
Well, it's not just that they have an incentive. I mean, this explains why it's so easy for them. It's because part of their training is to do it.
Pretty much. And what we see here is what we might look back on it, assuming that everything that this suicide note says would happen will, as sort of like a predictor. This is a sign for things to come, that where we have police marching down the streets, easily gunning people without a second thought.
It sounds like just, I mean, first of all, there's more to the note, but this note, what's interesting about this is, well, first of all, immediately as this story, started getting popular, Snopes tried to, the fake news capital of the website, of the internet, Snopes, tried to just say the story's not true, even though this was actually published by the New York Police Department. That's how we know all this. This is from the New York Police Department. And even though that page is 404'd, the original police report, which, by the way, very interesting that this starts becoming popular, and then all of a sudden that page 404's, isn't it?
Weird.
Well, yeah. Well, aside from that, the suicide note goes on to greatly detail FEMA programs and how the military they're also going to use prisons and FEMA camps that they've created around the state to the U.S. to imprison dissidents, and all of this is actually incredibly well detailed in an executive order which was signed into law on March 16th of 2012, Executive Order 13603, which anybody can look up right now. It's publicly available, and that's all that he's talking about is essentially enforcing that executive order. So even if this, hypothetically speaking, even if this was a fake suicide note, or even if this was just a crazy guy, the fact of the matter is that the information which he's presenting in here is something which the government has officially documented. They documented it 4 years before he killed himself.
Yeah, like why don't we read the rest of the note?
Snopes.
Yeah, Snopes is basically just a joke. They're not even trying to be legit at this point. They just say things are false when they're very obviously true, and they claim, "Oh, this came from a fake news website. Came from a fake news website. It doesn't matter what evidence exists to support it. That just means it's false," which is essentially what they did here.
I mean, even if this was indeed made by a crazy dude, like you said, I mean, it still matches up to what we've been witnessing for the past couple years now.
It also matches up with laws that already exist, executive orders which were put in place to enforce this. But yeah, we know the state. I was just talking with you guys about this the other day on Discord, that I could tell you the state's been planning on this. I could not have been the first one who's observed the fact that state policies operate on exponential growth curves and that the state needs to steal from people in order to fund themselves because they can't produce anything. That's how they work. You tell me that politicians have never observed that before, you're dreaming.
There's even one point in the suicide note that I found particularly striking, and that they're going to target preppers first. That's their first target.
I'll continue reading from where I was.
All right.
Quote, "We have been told that the economy is terminally ill and will fail in 2016. We're also told that the banks are all insolvent and the FDIC doesn't have nearly enough funds to bail out the depositors. So the dollar is going to default and the market's basically just going to collapse on a global scale. Something we can see right now is beginning to happen." And this was in a suicide note in 2016. And the plans to try and combat this were formulated in an executive order created in 2012. So, been planning it for a while. "We are told these events are unavoidable and it is imperative that the government survive when its people rise up over this. When the collapse takes place, detention camps created under the FEMA Rex 84 program in the 1980s to house illegal aliens whom we're going to deport will instead be used to imprison American citizens whom the government feels constitute a threat. American citizens will be rounded up without warrants and imprisoned without trial for God knows how long."
Holy shit.
Yeah. "These camps have been equipped to carry out Hitler-scale killings, an actual purge of American citizens by the very government which they themselves created and paid for. I cannot be party to this." Now, keep in mind, this is from the suicide note. These aren't my views necessarily, or of the podcast, but yeah. And yeah, you can also look up the FEMA Rex 84 program online as well. So that's something pretty much everybody can easily look up and find information on.
So continue.
Okay. "The government knows the military will rise up to stop this, so our military is being deployed overseas and intentionally involved in foreign fights so they cannot be here to help Americans. This is why certain ammunition and weaponry has been removed from state-level National Guard armories and over 1 billion rounds of hollow point ammunition has been brought by the federal government. The states themselves have been disarmed of military-grade firepower so they cannot defend themselves from the federal activities. This is also why local police departments have been militarized and provided with armored vehicles and weapons of war. When the inevitable collapse begins to take place, electric power to the entire country will be shut off, as will all forms of communication. All banks will be immediately closed. No one will be able to get any money because all the ATMs will be offline. Credit, debit, and EBT cards will not function. Anyone without cash will have no way to get any." So here's, I'm beginning to actually this is where I begin to think that some of the stuff this guy is talking about may just be speculation on his part, because here's what I was thinking about while reading this the first time. If the government was to EMP the power grid, that would actually harm them and make it less sustainable for them to try and control the population, because they wouldn't be able to easily manage production and they wouldn't be able to easily manage resources. It would set them back quite significantly. And that's, it's a lot like that Eric Salwell guy a month ago who said that that the government was going to nuke people. They're not going to, because they need people to, steal their property to fund themselves. And this is a case very similar to that, where I think it's what the government's thinking, but when push come to shove, there's no way they're going to do it, because they would end up essentially killing themselves as well.
Mhm. And I was talking to you on Discord earlier about the part where they talk about how the military was going to disobey and they're going to defend Americans. Now,
Yeah,
I've heard from people both in real life and talking on Discord who either are or were in the U.S. military, and they say like this kind of thing is something that they talk about all the time, and the consensus seems to be that they'll go to defend Americans. Now, that is, of course, a wonderful thing. I'm not second guessing their commitment or their honor, but I
well,
would point out that
plenty of
it's
conservatives say that they would stand up against the government if they tried to take their guns, but then you look at New Jersey and all these states passing red flag laws, and well,
or the bump stock ban.
pretty much all of them aren't putting their money where their mouths are.
well, the good news from that is that there seems to be mass disobedience in New Jersey, and the consensus, even among Trump supporters, seems to be that the bump stock ban is not acceptable. I think I've told you before. I think we talked about this in the last stream.
Yeah,
The bump
well,
stock ban,
actually,
and although you can find
pretty
several
split.
hot takes of Trump supporters just sucking his dick, it's clearly the minority because those voices get downvoted to hell.
Oh yeah.
Like, get downvoted by others, but there's a lot of them, like a concerning amount of them.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily think they're the minority. I'd say it's about a 50-50 split.
Regardless, well, I mean that the Reddit comments do strongly suggest that it's a very small minority. You might have looked at different sources than I did. You probably did, but the one thing I do notice, especially in regards to the military, is that it brings the context, or it brings new context into the Russophobia that the state and the media is trying to push. That Russia is the cause of all of our problems. That Russia is horrible, bad, evil. Russia, 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 Russia. And you can see like this reflected in not only what the media says, but you remember that Internet Bill of Rights bill, or I don't know if it was a bill, but proposal that was being moved through Congress that would essentially give the U.S. government complete control over the internet.
Yeah, how would I have not seen that? I was one of the main ones that popularized that.
Right. Well, if you recall, the main justification written in the bill was to combat Russian fake news. So, as you can imagine, I think Russia is not only being used as a scapegoat, but they're also going to be used as a mechanism by which they can move the military away from the domestic United States, force them to fight a pointless war, and thus allow them to go after Americans with impunity. Not only that, but because there is a war going on, they're going to use that exact war as a justification for it, as a means to combat quote unquote Russian spies, or to otherwise engage in some massive propaganda campaign.
Yeah, I think I agree with that to an extent, but I don't think that it has anything to do necessarily with controlling the populations, because most of the other governments which would be affected by this, like Japan, China, in the East particularly, aren't as hostile towards Russia as OPEC Western countries are. And that's the main reason why I think we're over there. I still believe that that's the main reason why we're over there expressing such hostility towards Russia, is because Russia challenges the status of our fiat currencies over here.
And that's a very strong reason for them to do so. Of course, I also think that there's another darker reason, and that is that conservatives in the US, who are more likely to be predisposed to resisting the United States government, more likely to be preppers, more likely to be the kind of person that the government does not like, they're also going to be more likely to join the military. And if they're fighting a war with Russia against other Christian nationalists, well, that means that you have Christian nationalists killing Christian nationalists. And ideologically, I see no reason why the state wouldn't be all for that.
Well, actually, here's something really interesting. The suicide note goes on to say the emergency alert system will be used to take over all public broadcast stations and tell the public that this is a result of a cyber attack. So that's actually even more eerie because yeah, what have we been hearing about for the last 2.5, 2 years?
Russian spies, Russian collusion, Russian hacking.
Russian
Exactly.
bots, Russian trolls.
Fake news over the internet and Russian cyber attacks. That's all we've been hearing about for the last 2 years.
Either that or it's North Koreans or it's North Korean cyber attacks because North Korea can do that somehow.
I've never heard of
Yeah,
that.
well, I mean, you can see just coincidentally as the stock market starts to get, iffy, Ukraine, starts to provoke the Russian Navy and try and start a war with Russia. And yeah, we've been saying for the last, our governments over here have been saying for the last year and a half, 2 years that Russian cyber attacks are a big thing, and here we are in this document seeing that that's on their playbook for when the market collapses. It's very fucking interesting.
Interesting. And the Ukrainian government, which by the way the US installed in 2014, so in essence they're an American proxy that's trying to start a war with Russia.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the things that happened on the 23rd, so the night before Christmas Eve. The State Department gave an additional $10 million to Ukraine's navy.
I think it was 10 billion, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's 10 billion.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
reading it. I was reading it off of one of my sources, but yeah. Um, Point is, we installed the Ukrainian government, which, by the way, they're an actual neo-Nazi government, and you don't hear anything about that.
Weird. It's
Yeah,
almost as if it's politically it's almost as if politicians want us to think certain things.
yeah. I mean, you think the media would be talking about them all the time, considering that they're so scared of the alt-right, and you got this country which was installed by the U.S. government over there. Well, no, they're the good Nazis. They're fighting Russia. they're the good Nazis fighting Russia to get this Nazi out of the White House.
Yeah, we
It's
Good
we
Lord,
fiddle
I mean,
around.
that's the thing. It's so absurd at this point that their propaganda narratives begin to cancel each other out. Like
un-
one doesn't make sense if the other is also true.
We
it's not unusual. The US has done this before during World War II. It's like, "Oh yeah, well these are the good communists. We need them to beat the Nazis." And as a result, you had 150 million people died because the U.S. State Department gave China and much of Asia over to Soviet Union. Yay!
It's funny that we can create ISIS and then the media is all over that shit, or Trump is all over that shit. But then you have the U.S. government actually creating one of the things that people have been fear mongering about for the past several years.
Yeah,
And
they
no one's
not only did they install this government, but they're using it as a proxy state in order to antagonize Russia out of our own interests.
And that's where things start to, I don't know if you could say go horribly wrong or go horribly right. I guess it depends on your point of view. If you're the state, this is very, very good. But you're evil,
Well,
so.
should we move on to the next story? I mean,
Is there more on the suicide note?
yeah, there is.
I feel like we'd be talking about it all stream if we were to keep going.
Yeah. Well, okay, the suicide note goes into detail that the federal prisoners, according to this order, are to be gassed to death. Like prisoners that are currently occupying the prisons in order to make space for the dissidents. And yeah, executive order. Then it goes into details specifically about Executive Order 13603. So
Yeah, I imagine a lot of you people listening to this right now are going to be having the same gut reaction that I did. That is that Americans will not tolerate this, and if this even begins or is in the progress, that people will rise up and immediately overthrow it. Well,
my first reaction is that I didn't believe it, but then I started doing research and everything starts to fit together remarkably well, especially when you look at the propaganda narratives that the media has been pushing for the last year and a half or two.
mhm.
One of the first things I started thinking about was like, I wonder how many people are going to start calling us conspiracy theorists. Like, no, this is actually some pretty fucked up shit. That that is clearly a thing that you can look around and say, yeah, there's definitely something suspicious going on here.
To them, I would say, well, you're a burglary theorist. Do you think that burglaries exist? If you think that burglaries exist, then you're a burglary theorist. It is not a controversial thing to be a quote unquote conspiracy theorist. Do you want to know why? And I fucking, you can't even make this shit up if you tried. But do you want to know why you have been conditioned into thinking that the term conspiracy theorist is a bad thing? Conspiracy is just a crime. That is the name of a crime. So somebody who is a conspiracy theorist is somebody who is theorizing or proposing that there is a conspiracy. That is completely uncontroversial. And okay, so where that became popularized in its current use, how it became stigmatized. Well, it got stigmatized in Operation Mockingbird. Yeah, it explicitly, Operation Mockingbird explicitly mentioned that drug war is one of those policies that that the government, but they specifically said call all dissidents conspiracy theorists, not word for word, but they used the word conspiracy theorist. So that's where that came from, and they've been doing it since the 60s.
How many the CIA agents? You said 400.
What was
Like
that?
400. Like how many CIA agents that are like just out there that could write an article at any moment? You know, like aren't there like 400 CIA
How many of
agents?
them are in the media? Well, it's kind of
Yeah.
hard. It's hard to say, but there's definitely a CIA presence. I mean, there was a list of published journalists back when they were creating documents for Operation Mockingbird. Officially, they stopped doing Operation Mockingbird in '94, but the CIA has since confirmed that they're still controlling the media. And you have people as prominent as Anderson Cooper who have CIA training. So, as a matter of fact, they're still running the Mockingbird program. They just officially stopped in 1994.
Oh yeah, and for sure they're going to keep funding it using drug money from Eagle too. Yay!
Even I have this strange feeling that even if they don't have money, they're still going to spend even without it.
Well,
Like, has there ever been a government in history where that has actually happened, where like they will keep like spending even though they don't have any money?
yes, the U.S. government is
The
doing that
U.S.
currently.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
stupid. I mean, like something other than the U.S.
that's basically just late stage statism. I mean, the last few years of the Roman Empire, that's what they were doing. Um, Point to any failed state, and for a brief period of time, that's what they were doing.
The thing is, though, no country in history has ever been as much debt as the United States is. There will be a reckoning, the likes of which the world has never seen.
Oh yeah.
So, like, you think the fall of the Roman Empire was bad? Whew, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, well, that's because all states are inherently set up to fail. The only reason that politicians continue to try and create them, it's not for your interests. It's because they want power.
But that's what all governments strive for. All they want is a monopoly on power.
That's
I mean, there's never been a point in history where, from the beginning of
So a
its
government
inception to the end,
is a monopoly on arbitration and a monopoly on violence, consequently.
there's a
that's why
monopoly on
people,
arbitration that gives that because it has that monopoly on arbitration, it can give itself that power.
which is why people should be ready to overthrow it.
And
in any way.
that's why I say monopoly on arbitration rather than monopoly on violence. Because when you just say monopoly on violence, it's not very specific and it doesn't necessarily explain how it got that.
Mhm.
Well, that's the point, is that governments don't have any explanatory power. But I think having a more intricate knowledge of how they work and how they'll try and function is helpful, especially when trying to predict their next actions.
Yeah. So, anyways, I think we've run that through. We'll probably end up doing more stuff about this in the future because it's
Definitely.
extremely important. And people don't expect other people to protect you. You need to get your money out of the banks, put it into crypto, put it into precious metals, physical precious metals, and you need to be able to protect yourself. Get to know your neighbors. Get to know what their skills are, what they do, and have a plan.
And don't go in the cities.
And whatever you do, stay away from the cities.
Well, thankfully for me, like I live in the suburb area. Like I don't I live in Texas, and I happen to live very close to San Antonio. Well, basically I am in San Antonio, but I'm not the city part of it. I'm not downtown.
Like, how far away would you, like, how far a drive would you say you're
Uh,
from?
it would take about depending on traffic, about 20, half an hour. I'm pretty well, somewhat close, but not directly in it.
You might be okay, but have a plan to evacuate.
I'm in between Austin and San Antonio. Let's
Have
just
a
say that.
have a plan to get have a plan to move in a direction that takes you away from the cities. I mean,
Speaking of like
you'll probably be fine for long enough to be able to evacuate. That's all I'll say.
yeah. Speaking of
Well, can we move
resources,
on to the next topic?
Yes, let's
yeah,
move on to the next topic.
sure.
It's about a certain professor that you all may know and some of you may love.
So just before we get into it, I don't know if I've said this. I've probably said this on stream before. I know, as a matter of fact, I was talking about this on Discord for a while now. But no, now I remember. I've mentioned it in some videos. But I have suspected for quite a while, after I've noticed very similar lines of rhetoric and how all of their suggestions seem to point to giving the state more power, even when it contradicts the premise of their argument or the substance of their argument. But I have suspected that significant figures in YouTube politics, the commentary scene, and the skeptic community particularly have been state operatives, or at the very least are taking marching orders from some state connect. And the only thing which has really stopped me from, following through with this, my suspicion is that I haven't really had any hard evidence before, but recently some hard evidence fell into my lap. And what you're about to hear and see, you're not even going to believe is actually real. But yeah, one of the bigger YouTube political characters is controlled opposition. Specifically, he wrote the revised Agenda 21 2013 revision, which was intended to whitewash it and make it less ideological. Well, to be more specific, less transparently ideological, to
Oh,
try and appeal to more people.
one
And
second. I just want to say that we should probably explain briefly what Agenda 21 is. We can't just assume that people know what that is.
Yeah, because I'm not
Okay,
familiar with
well,
that.
Agenda 21 is, according to the United Nations, a sustainable development program. And essentially, what it is it gives the UN authority to control several states, and would allow them to manage and allocate resources and to expropriate property from people whenever they declare there to be a crisis, when specific states would declare their martial law. And yeah, a lot of people have mentioned Agenda 21 for a long time, but haven't really gotten into extensive detail about it. But essentially, yeah, Agenda 21 it's very similar to Executive Order 13603, except Agenda 21's existed since 1992, and the attempted justification for it is an environmental program.
So basically, it gives the UN the authority to take your private property, to take away any semblance of national sovereignty, to dictate where you live, where you work, who you associate with, how your children are educated, and all of that stuff, where resources go, where food goes, where anything and everything anyone could ever possibly produce is distributed, all under the name of environmental protectionism. So basically, it's uh, it's global enviro-communism.
Right. And a revision to this in 2013 was released, and it was written by Professor Jordan B. Peterson. The Jordan B. Peterson. Yes, the one you're thinking of.
So you
And
can.
do you have the video pulled up, or do I have to play the audio clip of him admitting it?
I don't
Well,
have the audio, but could you send it to me really quick
yeah,
on Discord?
I have it right here, but
Oh crap!
yeah,
I actually probably shouldn't, because I sent the Hangouts link and someone might try to copy it.
okay, but yeah, Jordan Peterson, on an interview in October 26th of 2016 on a college radio show entitled The Dark Room, he said this. I'll play this really quick.
I worked on the UN Secretary General's High Panel for Sustainability, the report that was delivered in, I believe, 2013, and rewrote the underlying narrative to strip out most of the ideological claptrap.
So there you have it. It's pretty closed and shut. He just admits right there that he did it.
Hey, did you just turn on like your good mic by accident because you just suddenly got quieter?
I don't know what mic I'm using, but
You sound fine.
Did that come through though?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for those of you who need a bit of a refresher or just joined us, Jordan Peterson just admitted that he worked for the UN on a project regarding sustainability, and he removed some of the quote-unquote ideological claptrap. So basically, he just
specifically.
Yes. So this can only be a reference to Agenda 21, which
he specifically did though. He mentions a sustainability program, but it's on record that he specifically wrote a revision to Agenda 21 entitled "A New Global Partnership: Eradicate Poverty and Transform Economies Through Sustainable Development."
Mm-hmm.
This was a revision to Agenda 21, and he wrote it. It's documented and on record, and that's what he was referring to.
So basically, Agenda 21 is one of the most totalitarian ideas since Plato's Republic. And instead of trying to stop it, tell the UN to knock it off, or otherwise be one of the many voices who are trying to blow the lid on Agenda 21, he decided, the real problem with Agenda 21 is that it's too ideological, and we just need to change a few words around so it's more palatable than normies.
Yeah, so more people will buy into it. But no, I mean, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. I probably should have looked at the more high-ranking figures like Jordan Peterson, especially Jordan Peterson, considering his tenure in academia. I mean, if anyone was a state operative, it's gonna be him, and how all the skeptics and everybody, they seem to just blindly repeat they blindly share him around and repeat some of the stuff he says, even though some of his positions are awful. Like his understanding of Nietzsche, for example. I mean, I'm no fan of Nietzsche, but yeah, Jordan Peterson doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about when he's talking about existentialism.
Oh, you should have seen him about individualism and collectivism. Like, I'm pretty sure I saw some dude say this, but he said that you can't just put them at odds with each other. Like, there's going to be times we're going to need collectivism. There's going to be times where you.
Where is that interview?
I
You gotta send me that. That sounds hilarious. But
it was a long time ago. Like, it was like probably beginning of last year. Yeah, no, I can't. I'm sorry, but I do remember hearing that.
We're definitely going to need to do a Jordan Peterson exposed video, and that needs to be the first clip we play. Jeez.
But it's stuff like that is my point, though. This guy is not that smart. At best, he's a normie. And for some fucking reason, everybody, regardless of their ideology in YouTube politics, unless they're, regressive or whatever they're being called now, they're sharing around Jordan Peterson's work as if it's gospel. And so that already is incredibly suspicious. And the fact of the matter is, I doubt that a lot of these people who are idolizing Jordan Peterson even know a single thing that he's done or a single position that he holds outside of SJWs are bad. Feminists are bad.
You know what? Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's the position of every totalitarianist asshole that SJWs are bad.
I wouldn't
Purple
say
hair,
that.
woman bad.
I mean, SJWs are bad, but I mean, that's a very mainstream position. Plus, a lot of the figures, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that they're attacking, are put forward as actors. I could go more into detail about that, and I plan on doing that in a separate video. But yeah, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily an establishment or pro-state position, but that's definitely that's the safe position, because everybody can look at social justice warriors, like the really crazy ones, and think, well, these people are nuts. Oh God, if I stick with the Trump supporters, the nationalists, and the people who want to pull all this shit off, like, they're clearly more reasonable. That's clear. That's what it is. They're just making this one group look so insane and crazy that they're trying to scare people back into the political system and to supporting the left-right paradigm again.
Well, there's an interesting thought. Are SJWs a red herring?
And that's
maybe.
I guess that's a better way of putting it. Yes, SJWs are being used as a red herring by the actual political elite.
Mm-hmm. Everybody, look over here. Look how crazy they are. Everybody just ignore the fact that this professor that's gotten very popular on YouTube for some reason is a totalitarian asshole.
Now, I don't necessarily know about people like Sargon, Dave Cullen, Styx Hexenhammer. I mean, they may just be, mindless idiots regurgitating talking points. But, I mean, I know they are very closely connected in networks with one another, so that could be one way in which their rhetoric becomes similar. But yeah, they're all gravitating towards Jordan Peterson, so that's why I probably should have suspected Jordan Peterson was one of them. But No, I've got my eyes pretty closely on people like Steven Crowder and people like Christina Hoff Sommers and Milo Yiannopoulos because I suspect they're controlled opposition as well. I just don't have any hard proof of it. So I'm not
It,
like accusing anyone of anything. I'm just incredibly suspicious of them.
it's probably likely that Stephen Crowder is just simply a Styx Hexenhammer, except not the type of person to say transhumanism is dumb.
Yeah, well now Steven Crowder works for Glenn Beck. So, and I know he didn't enter that contract on his own. And I mean, he's also been on Fox several times. So he's like a Ben Shapiro kind of figure. And speaking of which, that's another character I have my eyes on. But
And be careful with Ben Shapiro. He can shoot
Well,
lasers out of his eyes.
you gotta be wary of all those damn glow-in-the-dark Jews.
Well, naturally.
now watch
We-
somebody take that out of context and say, "Oh, these people believe that Jews glow in the dark." Because they can't attack any of the
Yeah.
things that we're
no,
actually
no. The basketball Americans who work for the CIA glow in the dark. They just so happen to be Jewish.
The CIA
Don't
basketball
actually
Americans
say
have
the-
evolved.
Yeah, don't actually say the word because I'm pretty sure YouTube is looking for any excuse they can to take the stream down. So
Yeah.
Hey, at least Revan's not on stream where he said that one thing.
We'll be fine. So anyways, what else?
you
What else
wanted
do we
to
have to say?
you wanted to talk about what our favorite chosen people's state did on Christmas Eve.
Oh, right. That's correct. So for all of you who aren't aware, the chosen people, the greatest nation to ever exist on the face of the earth, a land of milk and honey, like just basically the perfect place where nothing, which is not capable of doing anything wrong ever, despite the fact that they basically need U.S. government subsidies to survive, has decided to bomb Syria.
Yeah, I remember seeing that article, like, when was it? Like Christmas Day? Or like the day after Christmas that this happened? Because I remember posting
It was a completely unprovoked attack too, and I heard on the mainstream media shortly after. My parents are boomers, so I mean, I was listening to Mark Levin in a car ride, but I heard him talking about it, and he was like, "Well, Israel, they were attacking." They were attacking Hamas, and yeah, Hamas had attacked them. No, they fucking didn't. No, that it was not Hamas, and they did not attack Israel first. That is an outright fucking lie.
Hamas is not in Syria.
Yeah, exactly. It was a Syrian military base. That's where they attacked, and Syria did nothing to Israel first to provoke it. It was completely unprovoked. So the mainstream media is just lying out their fucking ass about it.
Which is, of course, just what they're going to do. If people knew the truth about what was going on in Syria and what the United States was doing in partnership with the Sauds, I think that would be enough to overthrow the nation itself. I mean, the only reason that we're in Syria at all is because we want to build a frickin' oil pipeline.
I don't know. I mean, it's very curious why we're in Syria. You know, the pipeline doesn't go through Israel.
Well,
Syria. God damn it. I'm getting so tired right now.
Well, let's see.
I swear to God, I thought you said Israel.
No, the pipeline does not. The pipeline does not go through Israel. It does go through Syria and Damascus specifically.
It starts in I think Iraq. It goes through Iran and then it ends in Syria. I could have Iraq and Iran mixed up though.
I think it goes. I don't remember where it starts. I need to have that map in front of me, which I don't. But there's basically the crux of the argument
It starts
is that
in Iran, it goes through Iraq, and then it ends in Syria. so I had it backwards.
All right. So,
But yeah, there's a pipeline that starts in Iran, goes through Iraq, and then ends in Syria. And that's the reason why the U.S. is trying to occupy Syria as badly as it wants to. It's been trying to occupy that whole Gulf region since like the mid 70s, just coincidentally around the time OPEC formed and the Bretton Woods Agreement ended.
so I think what's going on is that Israel, in the interest of its own stability, whatever that means, wants to destabilize the Middle East because a country with a huge power vacuum is largely going to be engulfed in civil war and thus gives Israel license to do whatever the hell it wants. At least that's my understanding. Very limited, mind you. The United States.
I'd have to look into specifically why, but yeah, it seems very interesting what's going on with Israel. Doesn't really, I mean, if you just look at the mainstream narrative, there's really no explanation for why Israel has as much sway over international politics as it does.
Well, they're kind of just like they're BFFs with the United States government, and I guess that's the only reason. I mean, it's unclear how they have that much influence in the U.S. to begin with. But yeah, the Israel lobby is incredibly powerful, or so they say, in the U.S. government.
But yeah, there are controlled opposition shills in YouTube politics which have significant influence, and yeah, now we have hard proof of it. At least one of them. We don't know all of them, but if there's one of them, I guarantee you there's more.
Oh, absolutely. Well, we already know that Sargon attempted to join UKIP, killed UKIP, and, well, he's trying to get involved in mainstream politics. I don't know if that's because he's overestimating his own power, or
I don't know if he's a shill, but yeah, that is very much something that a one of those actors I was discussing on one of our earlier streams would do to kill a grassroots movement. Not only that, but he also heavily promoted that one app. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it was created
Candid.
by Candid, and it was created by Facebook, and he was shilling it to help them create an algorithm which would be used to censor people on the internet. So we know, at least in that regard, that he's controlled opposition because he claims to be opposed to censorship, and then he helped social media companies create more advanced bots to censor people.
And he supports an Internet Bill of Rights.
Which that's something I even mentioned earlier. I didn't mention that specifically, but yeah, you can tell a lot of these skeptics aren't thinking about it because they'll very openly say, yeah, we need to decentralize the internet. Decentralization is the answer. Now we got to regulate the internet and centralize it, nationalized under the FCC in order to stop these Silicon Valley companies.
The worst example has to be
their premise and the points that they're arguing for contradict their conclusion, and all of their conclusions point to give the government more power. It reeks of controlled opposition, and that's why I was skeptical of them, and I was right to be skeptical of them.
Because like Dave Cullen, like this is the guy to what was the thing he said about Bitcoin? Like there was
he said a lot of stuff about Bitcoin.
There was something, or am I think? I think it's something else. No, I still remember the one video about the internet Bill of Rights where he said that damn, what was it? Oh yeah, that the libertarians have failed again. This idea that if you just let the free market, if you just let it alone, it'll fix all the problems. And it's like, and he's like, no, that totally did not happen. It's like, you fucking moron. Do you not see how they have the power in the first place? I mean, I remember just in one of your videos recently, you talked about how in some areas in the States, they're like zoning laws. Like, what was the place? Kings County, Washington? Where
Yeah.
Comcast is like the only legally sanctioned company that can even provide internet, and it's like anyone else that joins, yeah, you gotta pay a fine, you gotta get the fuck out. Or what else? What else is there? Oh, and then there's also the fucking. No, have these guys never heard of the fairness doctrine? That was basically the equivalent to the Internet Bill of Rights like years prior to this, and that didn't work out. So it
Yep.
makes me think. What makes you think this time it's going to work?
Well, I
Or
think if I were to give them the benefit of the doubt, I would say that it's simple knee-jerk reaction indoctrinated into them by decades of government schooling. We're teaching like government good, government provide all the solutions. So
Okay,
whenever they
there
see a problem and they don't immediately have in mind a private sector solution, they just go like, "Ooh, we just need a government solution." Their creativity was drilled out of them at a young age. So naturally, this kind of thing, this conceiving of alternate solutions, doesn't come easily to them.
I don't remember. I was going to say a thing
But
about
all
Bitcoin.
right,
Like,
we've been streaming for over an hour, so should we just stop it here? Or
yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
was
think
going to say, yeah. But I was going to quickly say that the thing about the Bitcoin, like this is like Dave Cullen's the guy who seems pretty in favor of decentralization, but the moment something bad happens, they all just fucking swap over to the other side. They're like, yeah, no.
well, Dave Cullen, I've I don't know what he's doing. I think he might just be, a boomer because, yeah, he's kind of like Styx. He talks about a lot of the more expansive subjects. Like he tries, I think, but I mean, a lot of his conclusions are just real. They're being peddled by people like Jordan Peterson and Sargon. And that's the difficult part, is there are a lot of people who are just misled, and then there are people, as we've proven here, who are state actors, and you essentially can't weed them out without hard proof because of this.
Yeah. Well, I think we can wrap it up here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a lot of pretty significant stuff that happened. The government is planning to declare martial law, essentially. Jordan Peterson is confirmed controlled opposition and a totalitarian asshole, and Israel is aggressing against Syria because reasons. So yeah, thank you for joining with us today, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Night.
Night.
You're like cutting out there for like a moment.